And so welcome again to this week's Friday Forum. This forum about the California Mobility Center was originally scheduled to be presented by the Chief Executive Officer and General Manager of the Mobility Center, Arlen Orchard, but he had a significant conflict and could not be with us. But in his stead, Neil Best, the Chief Operating Officer of the California Mobility Center, will educate us on the structure and operation of the center. Prior to this role, he helped launch the Greater Sacramento Economic Council in 2016 as a Senior Vice President for this organization. He has over 20 years of experience in international corporate business consulting and economic development. Originally from Northern Ireland, and the island, Neil graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh in estate management. He also holds a master's degree in applied geographical information services, GIS, from Kingston University in London. Today, Neil will show us how the CMC works together with startup companies and industry leaders to drive the pace of discovery and support innovation in future mobility. So Neil, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Happy Friday, everybody. Tom, I apologize that I, went to universities that are somewhat obscure. I know they're not the ones you're probably used to announcing. But thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. So as Tom said, I'm going to give you an overview of the California Mobility, or the CMC as we refer to it. And some of you may have heard of the CMC before. I know particularly over the last couple of months, it's getting a lot more press here regionally, but I'm going to start from the assumption that you know very little, and just hopefully we can catch you up to all the things that we're doing. And before I wanted to jump into the slides, a bit of context setting. So, the slides are going to cover the what and how of the CMC, and also the who, like who's in the ecosystem that we've pulled together. But just starting with some context. So it is a nonprofit organization that is just over 18 months old, started at the beginning of last year, commercial operations, but it's really a concept that's been in the pipeline for almost 4 years now. So it started as a regional concept, and it's now exploded into this pan North American and even a global concept with some of the different network partners that we're working with. So from a regional perspective, it started from two different directions. So one was an economic development direction, as Tom already mentioned. That's my background. So economic development meaning a job creation and a workforce engagement approach. So Greater Sacramento Economic Council, along with the City of Sacramento, Sacramento State, and UC Davis, were figuring out how to bring a clean mobility cluster to the Sacramento region that would be able to support job growth in the clean mobility space. So obviously Sacramento State is interested in pivoting their engineering department to a growth industry. Clean mobility ticks that box. The City of Sacramento, always interested in economic development activities to provide career pathway opportunities for residents, recognized that clean mobility offered a really good opportunity because of the type of industry it is. It provides a wide spectrum of different opportunities, from technical opportunities where you could maybe enter the job market with a 12-week certification program through a community-based organization or a community college, through to a PhD level data scientist opportunity. So the spectrum of job opportunities that you can access within the industry was of interest to the city. It truly provides that career pathway for a middle income and high income paying job from multiple different starting points. So with the city and the universities trying to figure this out, and we also had another initiative here regionally with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD, around the commercialization of new technology. So SMUD was interested in getting ahead of the curve for the new technologies that were coming out of the clean mobility space, particularly around electrification and smart infrastructure charging, Obviously, that is going to have a huge impact on how SMUD is run as a business going forward. So they're interested in partnering and interacting with clients who are developing new products in that space as early as possible. So talking to them before they went too far down their commercialization chain so that they could help influence or advise on their products that they were developing would mean that they're more likely to create something that the utility would be able to use, and it would allow SMUD to stay ahead of the competition in terms of working within this space. So those two initiatives really have come together under the California Mobility Center as it is today. SMUD was the initial founding member and has committed $15 million to get the initiative stood up. It's since been followed in matching donations from a number of different organizations, including Sacramento State, which we'll get into. So one other thing I just want to say before I start the slides, the other point that I always like to start with is the California piece in this can be sometimes misleading. It doesn't mean that companies have to be from California or in California to avail of what we're doing at the CMC. It's really intended to be an entry point into the California market. And an entry point, as we all know, California in this space is a large market of early adopters. I think we're the second largest EV market in the world outside of China. There's a large funding opportunity in California through obviously the venture world, which everybody is aware of, but also in this space, the non-dilutive funding that you can get through state grants is significant. So I think this is truly one of those industries where the public sector is aligned with the private sector in terms of the funding that's coming in, especially over the last year and going forward. There's a significant amount of funding that's available for companies, early stage and later stage, that are innovating in this space to utilize. And then the third point about California is the market is set from the regulatory perspective here. So if you come to the California market and you're successful in understanding the certifications that are required and meeting all the different market regulations, then that is the gold standard for certainly North America, if not most of the globe as well. So that is the reason that you come to California. The CMC will help you navigate the complexities of the market, but also the opportunities that are here. And if you're successful here, you're really set up to be successful on a global stage. So I just wanted to give those additional bits of context before I dive into the presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. So yes, hopefully you can all see that. So my first slide here, I've touched upon this a little bit already. So what is the CMC? It's a new industry nonprofit. As the slide says here, it's all about improving efficiency and reducing risk in the commercialization process. So we're trying to get more companies in this space to get products to the market. We, as a nonprofit, feel like there's a role that we can fill that is unbiased, and we can play that collaborator role because there's a lot of different products and services out there. Innovators are working in their own silos to perfect their product and service. They have to work with end users for their product to be deployed or demonstrated. They have to work with different industry partners to get their product iterated and evolved to a point where it can be commercialized. They have to work with workforce development partners because this industry is so new. A lot of the jobs and opportunities that are coming out of this new technology space didn't exist, even a year ago. So we've recognized the gap in the market here for helping companies get ready for commercialization. So we do this in three main ways. So we have a physical space here in Sacramento, which we refer to as the Ramp-Up Factory, which is a 25,000 square foot industrial space in Depot Park, just in the Power Inn area inside Sacramento. that's really designed to be an infrastructure as a service type model. So if you're a new company that's developing hard tech products, and you need to access machinery and equipment and space to develop your products, then you can come in and utilize that space and pay on a space, time, equipment basis. Then we have what we refer to as our partnership, our collaboration model. So this is companies that are typically a bit further along in their development and they're ready to look for a demonstration or a deployment partner. We facilitate those meetings between those two groups, so the innovators and the end user. And then the third part of this is the workforce development aspect. So being an interface between universities, community colleges, and what it is that industry is actually requiring. So just to put that into the operational structure of the CMC. So as I said there, the ramp up factory is on the top left. What we refer to currently as the industry commercialization collaborative, which is that partnership model. And then the workforce development model, which sits across the base underneath both of them. So you can see here, I'd point you to the stage of commercialization. So the ramp up factory typically would be projects that are earlier stage. And that is a product of the fact that we have just some baseline equipment in the ramp up factory. So we have $500,000 worth of equipment in there that includes things like welding tables, vehicle lifts that can hold, pretty sizable vehicles up to, a large bus. We have some 3D printing. It's currently like an advanced tooling shop. So the types of projects that we can do in there are more on the earlier stage. The vision for it, we've earmarked additional funding. We've already got another $1.2 million that is committed to getting more equipment in there, and that will increase the sophistication of the types of projects that we can do. But at the minute, it's very much on the assembly, prototyping, retrofitting, testing side of things. And as you can see here, we are focused on providing machinery and equipment access, both to clients and to workforce development partners that we work with. So it is designed to be that industry workforce development interface, or feedback loop, as I like to refer to it, because a lot of this stuff is cutting edge and understanding. So for the universities or community colleges or these community-based organizations that are doing training programs, to be able to respond to what it is that the industry needs is really critical. And that's one of the main reasons why Sacramento State is such a key partner for us and why they're so engaged, because we'll be able to, through this program and through this approach, be able to take the pulse of what the clean mobility sector is looking for in terms of workforce development, and then be able to translate that into certifications or curriculum development, and then provide the workforce for the future. So this is a challenge that everybody is facing. It's not unique to California. Everybody is trying to understand the clean mobility or future mobility space, so that they can provide the workforce that's going to be required to make the industry successful. So we feel like this is a model that we have not seen anywhere else. We feel like we've got some good early success stories in the workforce development piece that we can build upon. So you can see, if you look at the workforce development side of this, it not only do we interact with the ramp up factory in these early stage projects by providing interns or access to engineering students. If these clients want to use them on their projects, it helps the clients by keeping their costs low when they're in growth mode. Obviously, it's beneficial for the students as they get access to real world projects. But we also have started to do work with companies that are way on this end of the scale, companies like Siemens, who have an issue with filling some of their technical positions. So We've worked with Siemens to create a 12-week certification program that is run through the CMC and the community-based organizations that we work with to make those candidates ready at the end of the 12-week program to then go into Siemens as a technician or whatever role that it is that they're currently trying to fill. So we've had, I think, close to 30 students and candidates that have gone through that technical training program and have been placed in Siemens alone. So it's important. The workforce development is not just serving this aspect, but also companies that fall into that later stage. And then and we'll go into more detail about each of these individually, but the ICC or Industry Commercialization Collaborative is around deployments, demonstration, matchmaking. Coalition for grant applications is a big one as well. And then the CMC also provides some commercial readiness reviews for companies that are trying to match up with members, as we refer to them, or end users for demonstrations or deployments. So that just means that we're helping walk them through their business plan to make sure that they're ready to interact with these end users and sell their products accordingly. So in terms of the ecosystem, and I've already started to use a couple of these terms already, but this is the ecosystem that we have built over the last 18 months. So it's a nonprofit, as I've already said, as well as grants and donations. We also have a membership model. So members who fall into these categories over here pay a membership fee. When we're engaging with members, we ask them to be active. So we ask them typically to either advise, demonstrate, or deploy clients' technologies on the client side, or you could swap this out for startups, I guess. But these are companies that are innovating in the space. So the clients are providing innovation solutions, but they have commercialization problems to solve. Members have innovation problems to solve, so they want to have insight into what's happening on the startup side. So CMC bridges that gap, and what we find increasingly is we're also connecting the dots both within the client side and within the member side. So we have working groups, for example, around fleet transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. We have multiple members that participate in that, multiple clients. And then this third bucket that we have is what we call preferred service providers. So these are companies that we've identified that help the startups at various stages of their commercialization journey. So within this group, we have a venture capital partner, Enertech Capital, who are based out of Canada. They launched a fund that sits alongside the CMC called the Global Future Mobility Fund that provides funding for startups. We also have a number of partners. We have 3 different PSBs that provide help with navigating grants and subsidies in California, one that also helps at a federal level. So we've got that venture capital and the non-dilutive funding side covered. We also have a preferred service partner and a strategic partner with a German engineering and consulting firm called Motion. They're an early strategic partner with the CMC. Actually, the ramp-up factory model is based largely on a model that they launched in Aachen, Germany. So they provide support to the ramp-up factory, and they also provide consulting engineering support to startups. They also provide industrial process design, supply chain analysis type consulting for any of the startups that are coming in through our ecosystem. We also have traditional consulting services. So Guidehouses is a traditional consulting firm that provides market entry support. And we've brought on a couple of new PSPs recently, one called VSI Labs, which provide testing vehicles for autonomous technology. So any clients that have sensor tech or cameras or anything that they need to get on a vehicle to test its viability for autonomy, they can use the VSI platform to do that. We also just brought on an executive recruitment firm as a PSP because we were getting asked a lot from clients to help find staff for their growing business. So we brought somebody on to help with that. And then we've a number of other different ones that we can share in more detail, but I think we're up to 11 different service providers now. This is the same slide, but just giving you I guess this is the obligatory logo slide that everybody likes to share, but this is just to show that we are real. And over the last 18 months, we've gone from this slide to populating, and this is just a snapshot of who we have now as members, clients, and PSPs. I think we're up to over 50 clients and members now. And as I said, we have 11 PSPs. So this is just an example of some of those companies. On the member side, you can see, we are now no longer a regionally biased organization. We still have our regional partners like City of SAC, GSEC, SMUD, UC Davis, but we've now grown to include the likes of Southern Cal Edison. We have EDF, you're a French energy company, Linamar, which is one of the world's largest tier 1 auto suppliers, Lacey, which is an incubator down in LA. We also note we got in here, we've got an LX, ZF. So we've grown to be much more than just the Sacramento region, which was always the idea. Start with the regional money and then grow from there. On the client side, we've got a really broad base of clients from, the OEM side. So we've got, for example, Bollinger Motors as an OEM. They were originally developing an electric SUV. They pivoted and now they're doing a Class 6 truck. So we're working with them. Zeus Electric Chassis is another example of an electric truck that we worked with. I'll talk a little bit more about them. And then we also, on the software side, have companies like EMUS, which is a Lithuanian battery management system company, Protect, which is a predictive maintenance company, software company. Intertie is a charging infrastructure company that has an augmented underground battery storage solution. So we have a broad range of clients, and these are all listed on our website if you wanted to get more information on who we're working with. So just taking each of the different business units really quickly so you understand how we interact. So on the ICC side, from a member's perspective, I already alluded to this, that there's really a range of how they could interact, but we encourage them to be active and not passive. So at a minimum, they observe, which means they participate in webinars and forums and listen to what it is our clients or service providers are saying about the market. We prefer them to play more of a role in this advisory capacity. So like I was saying about SMUD at the start of the call, how they could advise some of these companies and make sure that they're on the right path to be successful. The next stage beyond that is, as a demonstration partner. So if there's a product or service that's right in their wheelhouse and they're willing to demonstrate it, we want to encourage them to do that. And then right through to signing a purchase order and being a deployment partner with some of our clients. On the client side, so the appeal to clients really falls into these three buckets. As I said before, this is about de-risking the commercialization process for these companies. It's also about removing the friction points between going to different stakeholders as you grow your business. So speed to market is really important as you're growing your business. To have a concierge type approach with a nonprofit like the CMC really does help you manage the interactions with different service providers or end users. And, that's important as an entrepreneur or as an early stage company. You can appreciate that you're mostly focused on trying to get your product and service to be as best as it can. And sometimes you need that external help to help you navigate not only the interactions with different stakeholders, but also to make you stop and think of, whether or not you're going down the right path with your innovation. So single access, like I said, CMC is designed to act as that concierge approach. We have, our own director of client services that helps onboard new clients. And once they're onboarded, they get pulled into our membership ecosystem so they can participate in different forums and working groups that are relevant to them. So in terms of onboarding clients, there's no cost for them to come in unless they're going to do anything directly with the CMC at the ramp-up factory. For example, if they're going to come in and take some space and rent some equipment, then there's a cost associated with that. But really, we're designed to be a facilitator. So if they want to do a project with a member, the CMC can facilitate that. We don't take any direct costs from the client. But if they do end up doing a deployment, we'll have some sort of a referral fee agreement with them. Similarly, if they do any work with our preferred service providers, there'll be a referral fee for that as well. But the upfront costs to clients are minimal, if not zero, unless they're going to do some work either with a PSP or directly with us. So the ramp-up factory element of the CMC is, this is the simplified version of what it is. It's to bridge that gap between the concept phase and series production. I think hard tech innovation and commercialization is extremely hard. Where this came from in terms of modeling the concept in Germany, there's that understanding of, doing a startup in the software space is relatively low capital expenditure when you compare it to hardware. Hardware scaling and innovating is just a very costly exercise. So what could we do to try and reduce costs and make it more likely that these companies will have enough runway to get to some credible form of product or service? So that's where this infrastructure as a service model came into play. We're saying these companies, you don't have to go and rent your own industrial space. You don't have to go and get your own.
After 4.
Somebody needs to mute. You don't have to go buy your own machinery. As you know, a lot of this machinery can cost millions of dollars. So we're trying to build this nexus point where you can come and use the space and keep your costs as low as possible. And then just diving in a little bit deeper into this is the roadmap that our friends at PEM Motion, the engineering consulting firm, provided for us. So this just shows you, the continuum from the rough product idea through to the full industrialized product. You've got a lot to do as you go through the ideation phase, the concept phase, engineering, prototyping, testing, industrialization, and then the production scale up. So really, for all of this, the ramp-up factory and the associated stakeholders on the workforce development side can really help you through this process. I think the other important bit about this is, as you are developing a new product, it's important not to just focus on the widget being as good as it can be. You've got to think about, okay, if this is going to go to scale, what does that mean? And we've all seen that, particularly in the last 2 years with the issues around supply chain. Part of this is going to be engaging with somebody like PEM Motion or some of our other consultants to map out, okay, once I go to scale, what does that mean? What are the supply chain constraints? Can you help me with a blueprint to get to that stage? And that's one of the key products that comes out of this. So we're not just a industrialization shop that's going to help you perfect your widget. You're going to come out in the end potentially with this roadmap or blueprint for getting to scale. And that's important for many reasons. But, you know, from a startup perspective, if you're going out and looking for investment money and you don't have this question answered, you're very unlikely to get any investment from venture capital companies. So it's really important that that is part of this process. So, you know, depending where you fall in this chain, you need to at some point be thinking about this production scale up piece and have the work done so that you're able to answer those questions and think through what the next phase of your development is going to be. So on the workforce development side, this is an area that is extremely important to the CMC. And, you know, this came up, I think it's important to say this is not something you hear workforce development kicked around a lot these days. And this is not something that was just put in there to tick a box. We heard this over and over again in our feasibility stage 3 years ago, you know, not just from our academic partners, but interestingly from the industry side. So they've recognized that there's a constrained labor pool. They've recognized that these are new jobs that are being created. It's a zero-sum game if they're going to go and, you know, try and steal talent from the competitors, then, you know, that's no way to grow the industry long term. So we heard this in our feasibility study loud and clear. So we backed it into the CMC approach right from the word go. We have our own CMC Director of Workforce Development, Mike Bell, who's also an adjunct professor at Sac State. He brings a wealth of experience in developing certification programs. He has also been very successful early on in creating this umbrella of the CMC to connect different community-based organizations to work with them to provide the training that's needed to fill not just clean mobility technical jobs, but also advanced manufacturing. So he was able to do that with some early funding from the City of Sacramento through the CARES Act program. And we've been able to get candidates through that program and placed into jobs already. So we have a basis for working on this going forward, but this is only going to get more and more attention as the CMC builds out, because it's really a unique approach that's answering real world problems in terms of solving for the workforce development issue. I'll give an example. During the feasibility stage, we worked with Los Rios Community College as part of the feasibility stage to analyze some of the data that was coming out of the German model. We asked our friends in Germany to provide a list of jobs that were coming out of these startups that had spun out of the ramp-up factory and have been very successful and growing to 100 people plus companies. And they provided the job descriptions of these companies. And we were trying to do a match with SIC codes, which if you're not familiar with, they're standardized codes of jobs here in the US. And it took a lot of back and forth because initially we thought it was a language barrier issue, but then we realized after spending time, 30 to 40% of these jobs didn't translate into an SIC code over here because they don't exist. They didn't exist when the SIC codes were being developed. So there's this, and that's a good indicator of where the industry is going. There is a huge shift, and it just emphasizes the importance of having these models where industry and academia and workforce are as closely connected as possible, because too often in the past, those two worlds do not talk closely enough. And if you don't, especially in an industry that's growing and evolving as quickly as this one, then you're in danger of leaving your community and your residents ill-equipped to serve jobs in this industry sector. So this is a critical part of what we're doing. It's why, as I said, Sac State is a critical partner in it, but we're also doing this with the community colleges, and we're doing it with community-based organizations. And like we've done with the board, this has started as a regional approach. So Mike with the City of Sacramento got started with the Career Pathway Program. It's now got state funding from the California Workforce Development Board to work on creating this throughout the state of California. So that's the model of a lot of what the CMC has been doing, and we're continuing to do that with some of these working groups and forums that we're pulling together on the client member partnering side, is starting regionally, and then, you know, once we've got the proof of concept and the buy-in, then we can expand beyond the Sacramento region. So this slide really is just trying to pull together illustrate how we work together on the member. So we got the member role along the top, the company stage along the bottom, how they might use some of our service providers in the middle, and then this sort of continuum from the earlier stage to the later stage. So, you know, as an earlier stage, you're not obviously going to be ready for a demonstration or deployment discussion, but you will obviously want to get some advice from some of our members who are potentially interested in using your technology when it's ready. So that could be through advising as you're going through this prototyping building phase. Then as you move into the phase where you've had one or two prototypes, you might need some testing and validation. So we can help you know, with some of our service providers provide the data collection for demonstration projects, and then all the way through to full deployment. So we have companies like eSource on our service provider side that help with deployments to make sure that they go as smoothly as possible. And that's really important, particularly because you're talking about deploying these new types of equipment, like take an electric bus or electric refuse truck. If you deploy that in a city, you know, it's not like deploying a new internal combustion engine refuse truck. It's going to require a completely different set of analysis. It's going to require a completely different set of understanding what is going to be required to make this scalable. So what infrastructure are you going to need? You know, how is the charging going to work? How's the, you know, refueling going to work if you're looking at a hydrogen model, for example? So these are the sorts of things that we can bring to the table as the CMC, is connecting cities and counties and transit authorities with these types of services so that they're not left on their own with a procurement of a new cool electric truck, but with no idea of how to test whether or not this is something that they can roll out en masse. And then this is the exciting slide. So this is our partnership with Sac State. As I mentioned, it's critical. One thing that we have also taken from the German model is we watched their evolution from, they started the ramp-up factory in 2014. Similar model, it was in conjunction with the university over there, the University of Aachen. Started in a facility similar to the one we have in Depot Park. And just as of, I think, 2020 or 2021, it was during the pandemic, they grew from that starter facility to 100,000 square foot building, which was off campus. So this is what we anticipate. We follow a similar trajectory to the Penn Motion RWTH Aachen University model, where we want to have this 100,000 square foot building built on the new Ramona Avenue campus, which is going to be referred to as the hub, I believe, which is 25-acre campus just south of the main campus, just south of 50 there, top far end road. This is the portion that would be the CMC, which would include the ramp-up factory, but it would also include classroom space, showroom space, training facilities for students to work directly in the building right next to industry projects. Then another part of it is the test track. So, you know, a pretty sizable test track. Probably won't look anything as pretty as this one does, but it would be designed not only for testing vehicles, but also for putting in smart infrastructure and connected infrastructure for testing alongside vehicles as well. Interestingly, just on this campus, the California Department of Justice is also committed to getting a building on the southern part of the campus here. So really, I think the anticipation is, as well as the biology and sciences that could come and service on the DOJ, because they're going to have their forensics operation there. So you have some students on that side, and then obviously on the CMC side, we will have interest from the engineering department who are already starting to run some student clubs in our smaller startup facility at Depot Park. So having some presence from students here on the campus, and then for those, I'm sure many of you know, this is a really quick connection through, since they built that new road through to the new campus or the existing campus, that we could really do some interesting testing of new vehicle technologies as well. So it's very exciting. This site has been through the EIR process, so it's been through the environmental reviews. It's been approved by the Board of Trustees that the CMC would be an anchor tenant in the project. So we are pretty far along in terms of conceptually, and now we are all rowing towards trying to get the seed funding to get this started. So exciting times ahead. And then this is, I mentioned Zeus already. This is a case study of how we work with early stage companies or startups to get them connected for full scale deployment. So we worked with Zeus. This is their truck here. It's a very cool looking fully electric Class 6 truck to engage with the SMUD procurement team. And they ended up, after months of negotiation, the SMUD is the first purchaser of 5 of Zeus's trucks. So to get to that point, we did also work with our friends at California Strategies and at the Air Quality Management District. So as they were going through the procurement discussions with SMUD, we also were able to get them through the qualification process for HFIP, so that by the time SMUD was ready to sign the contract, we were able to get some incentives in place that would reduce the cost of the vehicle. So it was easier for SMUD to justify making the shift. So it wasn't such a big delta between buying an electric truck and buying an ICE equivalent once we got those HFIP vouchers in place. And then I already mentioned eSource. They're the company that's helping with these deployments, and they're already as part of the team that's helping with the delivery of the products as well, because the product hasn't been delivered yet. There's some negotiations still going on. Zeus still has some things to work on, but eSource is helping negotiate in between SMUD and Zeus. And then Enertech Capital, they are the venture capital group. They provided Zeus with some early advice in terms of finance and business planning, which was important for Zeus to then go out and secure additional funding. So this is the last slide. So I really just bringing together what I've talked about already, what the CMC provides: single point of access, partnerships, programming, funding is key, and then we manage that pace of progress and de-risk it for any clients that are coming into the ecosystem. So as I said right at the start, this is about coming to California, or growing within California and being successful, and then setting you up to be successful on a global scale. We've got obviously our partnership with our friends in Germany, so we have the links to European ecosystem. We've also got some early discussions with a group out of Windsor, Essex in Canada around the manufacturing side of things. So we play to California's strengths around innovation and getting products to a point where they are commercially viable, but we also recognize that the areas like Windsor, Essex in Canada, or Michigan in the Midwest, that is where the expertise lies in terms of full-scale manufacturing. So California and the CMC has a role to play on the innovation side and being that center of excellence. And we'd anticipate, just like you see in the Bay Area from some of these startups, keeping these centers of excellence for early stage manufacturing and probably, keeping that there. But if it's going to go to scale, we need to work with our friends in the Midwest or in Canada to make sure that we're leveraging everybody's strengths across North America. And we also have connections into Mexico as well through our friends at Penn Motion. And we're exploring different nodes in Europe as well. So this is part of a global ecosystem that we're building. It's definitely not designed to be an island. It's an exciting thing to be a part of, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has, but hopefully that's giving you a good overview of what it is that we're working on. So I'll stop sharing now.
Okay, thank you very much. And we do have in the Q&A 10 questions, so I will probably select one or two right now, and then you can go to the live audience. So let's see, I've got something occluding me here. I'm supposed to start my video. I'll do that. All right. The first question of interest is from Anonymous. Are there mechanisms to encourage smaller businesses and/or businesses run by minorities, women, etc.?
Yeah, so I think what's important to note with the ramp-up factory business model, we haven't actively started to market that yet. We've been waiting until we had the machinery and equipment in place before we actively went out and started to solicit new clients. So it's fair to say that on the client side, a lot of it has been either word of mouth or through our network. So we haven't put anything in place specifically to help address that. We do have a client onboarding process where we do a questionnaire and then we review it internally, and we have our own little matrix that we look at. And part of that, we do look at the diversity of ownership. So that's one thing. On the workforce development side, we are also heavily focused on serving underserved communities and making sure that they have access to the technical training programs that we have. So I think there's more to come on the ramp-up factory client acquisition piece, because as I said, we're waiting until we had the machinery at a certain capacity before we start advertising that. But we have the framework in place to review companies on that basis. And I think you'll start to see in Q1 next year more marketing going out to look for companies that will fit that mold.
Okay, the next question is from Friendship Force. Can you define, in quotes, hard tech, clean mobility, innovation products, ?
Sure. So we have 4 areas, subsectors that we have defined as focus for us. And this is with the caveat that because we're so early, we recognize that we may have to pivot, but our areas of focus are on smart infrastructure, charging infrastructure. So anything that's hard tech related to that. Battery reuse, remanufacturing is also a big one. And then electric, medium and heavy duty vehicles. So we don't particularly focus on the passenger side, although we do have one client that falls into that space. So heavy duty, medium duty, and then also off highway. We're trying to do as much as possible in the off highway OEM space. And then the 4th bucket is hydrogen. So we think that is really going to be a growth area going forward. So hydrogen is the 4th of our subsector focus areas.
Okay, thank you. The next question could come from the live audience if they have questions.
Oh, do we have questions from our live audience?
You have none?
We don't have any yet, so why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay, sure. I have quite a few. Another question. This is by Daniel Rooney. Why do you use the word mobility rather than, say, transport or some other more descriptive term?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the infrastructure piece. So we want to make sure we're including charging infrastructure as part of that. So mobility, we feel, is a more holistic term that covers things like charging infrastructure. So that's the primary reason. Transportation is more vehicle specific. So mobility is that's the reason we went with mobility.
Okay. Another question from Marion Shepherd. What is your background? How did this nonprofit start up?
Sure. My personal background or the nonprofit's background?
It doesn't say, but I think maybe yours. Some of that may come at the intro, but
Right. I think Tom covered mine. My background is really corporate consulting, then into economic development, and I got involved in this project as a result of the work that GSEC was doing, along with the likes of Valley Vision. There was a study that they did with the Brookings Institute in 2016 to look at the Sacramento region and come up with a plan to diversify the economy away from being so reliant on government jobs. And it came up with 3 different industry clusters that we should focus on as a region. One was ag tech, one was life sciences, and one was clean mobility. So the ag tech piece, for those of you that are not familiar, I'm sure most of you will be, but there is a ton of activity in that space that's happening in West Sacramento and around Woodland and Davis. On the life science side, Aggie Square is really the signature project on that. And then the clean mobility side, this CMC is the coming together of, as I said, Sac State, UC Davis, the city, and SMUD to build that cluster for clean mobility. So that's how it came to be. So, we are following a planned, a well thought through and planned out economic development strategy that we got, the Brookings Institute to lead. So, this is it's not something that's been, just done on the spur of a decision. It's been done off the back of analyzing what this region is good at, what it could support, and clean mobility is definitely falls within that space. And a lot of that is down to the engineering talent that Sac State has had traditionally on the applied side, and going forward, we see that the growth in the applied engineering side being in the clean mobility space. So that's the how it came to be, I guess.
okay, just maybe one more. We have a couple minutes. This is anonymous. When do you expect the project with CSUS to be up and running?
Yeah, so that is the question. It depends how quickly we can get the funding. So to get the move to that location is, as you can imagine, it's not going to be an insignificant funding amount. So we are actively looking for funding at the minute. We recognize it's going to come from multiple sources. So our timeline, if we were to secure funding within the next 12 to 18 months, we're probably looking at 3 to 4 years before it would be built. If we don't, that timeline will just stretch out accordingly. So we have to get the funding. I guess the optimist in me is thinking that the 12 to 18 month time frame is probably as good as any, because there's a lot of money that's out there from the government on the state and federal side in particular for funding these types of projects. We just have to make sure we're telling the story right and have everything lined up to be successful on that front. But we started the process. We've had some good early discussions, so everybody keep their fingers crossed and we can hopefully get this project up and running.
Thank you.
Neil, I think we probably have time for one more question. Eileen,
Sure.
is there another question there?
Oh, yes, there is. What do you mean by ecosystem by Marion Shepherd?
Yeah, so that's back to that slide where the 3 different stakeholder groups. So ecosystem is just the different stakeholders that interact with each other within the clean mobility space. So when we refer to the ecosystem, it's usually in those 3 buckets of clients, members, and stakeholders. But there is a broader ecosystem that we also think about, which is, people who are maybe not formally part of the CMC, but they have a role to play. So I'll give you a good example. When we're thinking about what machinery and equipment to purchase, we made sure we did an audit of local manufacturing shops and tool shops to make sure that we weren't replicating anything that they had. So, we were adding to what the region can provide instead of, operating as a silo. So those manufacturers are part of our broader ecosystem. So if a company comes in and needs to use a particular type of equipment and we don't have it, but we know some of our regional partners have it, we will, be connecting them in and bringing them into the discussion. So yeah, the ecosystem is, either the clients, members, and service providers that are formally part of the CMC, but it's also this broader ecosystem beyond that.
All right. Well, Neil, thanks very much. This has been a fantastic eye-opener for us. You're obviously at the cutting edge, between the cutting edge and the bleeding edge of technology.
Right.
And I hope you don't bleed out too far before you get some success with the cutting edge. So great talk, appreciate it. And we're going to provide you with an honorary membership to the Renaissance Society and also a monetary donation to the Seth Nelson Student Emergency Grant Fund. And thank you for your presentation. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
And as most people know, all of our forum presentations are recorded and archived. You can see them if you go to the Renaissance Society website homepage, click on recordings, or again, if you go to YouTube and search the Renaissance Society Forums Committee, you can access them there. Next week, we will have Daniel Hahn, former police chief, on the evolution of policing and public safety in a time of social unrest. That ought to be interesting. And we encourage you to contribute to the ASI Food Pantry. To donate to that, simply go to the Renaissance Society homepage. Again, everything's on there. Just look for the donate button and you can help those needy students out immediately. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.